The crying pierced through the airplane cabin like a siren, causing heads to turn and passengers to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Rachel Martinez clutched her 6-month-old daughter, Sophia, closer to her chest, whispering desperate apologies to anyone within earshot. The baby's wails seemed to echo louder in the confined space of the economy section, and Rachel could feel the weight of judgmental stares boring into her back. "Please, sweetheart, please," she whispered, bouncing Sophia gently while tears of exhaustion threatened to spill from her own eyes. The young mother had been awake for nearly 36 hours straight, having worked a double shift at the diner before catching this red-eye flight from Los Angeles to Chicago. The ticket had cost her every penny of her savings, but she had no choice. Her sister Carmen was getting married in 2 days, and despite their strained relationship, Rachel couldn't miss it. At 23, Rachel looked older than her years. Dark circles shadowed her brown eyes, and her once vibrant smile had been worn thin by months of struggling to make ends meet as a single mother. Her ex-boyfriend had disappeared the moment she told him about the pregnancy, leaving her to navigate parenthood alone in a studio apartment that barely qualified as livable. Every day was a battle between paying for diapers or groceries, between keeping the lights on or buying Sophia's formula. The flight attendant, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, approached with barely concealed irritation. "Ma'am, you need to keep your baby quiet. Other passengers are trying to rest." "I'm trying," Rachel whispered, her voice cracking. "She's usually such a good baby, but she hasn't slept properly in days. The change in routine, the noise." She trailed off, knowing her explanations sounded like excuses. Sophia's cries intensified, and Rachel noticed several passengers pulling out their phones, likely to record her embarrassment. Her face burned with shame as she realized she was becoming one of those stories people would share online. The inconsiderate mother who ruined everyone's flight. "Maybe you should have thought about that before booking a flight," muttered an elderly man across the aisle, loud enough for her to hear. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. She had considered driving, but her old Honda had broken down 3 weeks ago, and she couldn't afford the repairs. This flight was her only option, booked with money she should have used for next month's rent. She was already dreading the conversation with her landlord when she returned. Just as she was about to retreat to the airplane bathroom to try calming Sophia in private, a gentle voice spoke beside her. "Excuse me, would you mind if I tried something?" Rachel looked up to see a man in an expensive-looking navy suit, probably in his early 30s, with kind blue eyes and perfectly styled dark hair. Everything about him screamed wealth and success. From his Italian leather shoes to the platinum watch on his wrist, he was the type of man who belonged in first class, not squeezed into economy seating. "What?" Rachel stammered, confused by his unexpected offer. "I have experience with babies," he said with a warm smile. "My sister has 3 kids, and I've learned a few tricks over the years. Sometimes a different voice or touch can help. Would you trust me to try?" Rachel hesitated. She had learned to be wary of strangers, especially men who showed sudden interest in her and Sophia. But something about his demeanor felt genuine, and she was desperate enough to try anything. "Okay," she whispered, carefully transferring Sophia into his arms. The moment the baby settled against his shoulder, something magical happened. Within seconds, Sophia's cries softened to quiet whimpers, and then to complete silence. The man's large hand moved in gentle circles on her tiny back, and he hummed a soft melody that seemed to work like a lullaby. "How did you—" Rachel breathed, amazed by the sudden peace. "Like I said, lots of practice," he replied quietly, continuing his soothing motions. "Sometimes babies just need a change of scenery, or in this case, a change of arms." Around them, the cabin had settled into grateful quiet. Passengers who had been glaring moments before now watched with curiosity and approval. The flight attendant even smiled as she passed by, nodding appreciatively at the resolved situation. "What's her name?" the man asked, still holding Sophia with practiced ease. "Sophia," Rachel replied, studying his face. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. "And I'm Rachel. I can't thank you enough for this." I was about to have a complete breakdown. "Nice to meet you both, I'm James," he said, then added with a chuckle, "And don't mention it. We've all been there, maybe not with a baby, but we've all had those moments where everything feels overwhelming." As Sophia drifted toward sleep against James's shoulder, Rachel found herself relaxing for the first time in days. She watched how naturally he held her daughter, how his expensive suit jacket was now wrinkled and slightly damp from baby drool, yet he didn't seem to care at all. "You're not sitting in economy, are you?" she asked, suddenly realizing he was far too well dressed for their section of the plane. James smiled mysteriously. "Let's just say I like to mix things up sometimes. First class can be predictable." There was something in his tone that made Rachel wonder if there was more to his story, but she was too grateful and exhausted to press further. The gentle hum of the airplane engines, combined with the first peaceful moment she'd had in weeks, began to make her eyelids heavy. "I should take her back," she said half-heartedly, though Sophia looked more comfortable than she had in days. "She's fine here if you want to rest," James offered. "I don't mind holding her." "You look like you could use some sleep." Rachel wanted to protest, to maintain her independence and not accept help from a stranger, but her body was betraying her. The combination of exhaustion, relief, and the first kindness she'd experienced in months was overwhelming her defenses. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice already thick with impending sleep. "Absolutely. Rest. I've got her." Despite every instinct telling her to stay alert, Rachel felt her head growing heavy. The warmth radiating from James, the steady rhythm of his breathing and Sophia's peaceful silence created a cocoon of safety she hadn't felt in months. Almost without realizing it, she found herself leaning against his shoulder, her consciousness fading as the airplane carried them through the night sky. What Rachel didn't know was that James had been watching her struggle for the past hour, his heart breaking at the sight of such a young mother trying so hard to manage alone. What she also didn't know was that James Whitmore wasn't just any passenger. He was the CEO of Whitmore Industries, one of the largest charitable foundations in the country, and this chance encounter was about to change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. Rachel stirred awake to the gentle announcement that they would be landing in Chicago in 30 minutes. For a moment, she was disoriented, wondering why she felt so warm and comfortable. Then the reality of her situation crashed back. She was still leaning against James's shoulder, and Sophia was sleeping peacefully in his arms, completely content. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she whispered urgently, sitting up quickly and immediately missing the warmth. "I can't believe I fell asleep on you. You must think I'm completely inappropriate." James smiled, seemingly unfazed by her embarrassment. "You were exhausted. Both of you needed the rest." Sophia only woke up once, and I managed to keep her calm. He carefully transferred the sleeping baby back to Rachel's arms. "She's an angel when she's peaceful like this." Rachel looked down at her daughter's serene face, marveling at how different Sophia looked when she wasn't crying from stress and overstimulation. "She really is. It's just been so hard lately. Everything feels like it's falling apart, and I'm barely keeping my head above water." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, and Rachel immediately regretted the overshare. This stranger didn't need to hear about her problems, no matter how kind he had been. "Want to talk about it?" James asked gently, his blue eyes showing genuine concern. "Sometimes it helps to tell someone who's not involved in your situation." Rachel hesitated. She had learned to keep her struggles private, partly from pride and partly from the painful experience of people who offered help only to disappear when things got difficult. But something about James's demeanor made her feel safe. "I'm a single mom," she began quietly, glancing around to make sure other passengers weren't listening. "Sophia's father left when I told him I was pregnant. I work at a diner in LA, pulling double shifts just to afford our tiny apartment. My car broke down, I'm behind on rent, and I used my last savings for this plane ticket because my sister is getting married." She paused, fighting back tears. "The worst part is, Carmen and I haven't spoken in 2 years. We had a huge fight when I got pregnant because she thought I was throwing my life away. She only invited me because our mother guilt-tripped her into it. I don't even know why I'm going, except that she's the only family I have left since Mum died." James listened intently, never interrupting or offering empty platitudes. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, processing her words. "That takes incredible courage," he said finally. "Raising a child alone, working multiple jobs, and still making the effort to repair a relationship with your sister. You're stronger than you realize." Rachel looked at him skeptically. "You don't know me. For all you know, I could have made terrible choices that led to this situation." "Maybe," James acknowledged, "but I've been watching you since we took off. The way you apologize to every passenger, how gently you handle Sophia even when you're stressed, The fact that you're going to a wedding where you might not be welcome just because it's family. Those aren't the actions of someone who makes terrible choices. Those are the actions of someone who cares deeply about doing the right thing. His words hit Rachel harder than she expected. When was the last time someone had said something genuinely kind about her character? Her ex-boyfriend had constantly criticized her decisions. Her boss at the diner treated her like she was disposable, and even her own sister had made her feel like a failure. "What about you?" she asked, deflecting the attention away from herself. "You never told me what you do for work, and you still haven't explained why someone who can obviously afford first class is sitting back here in economy with the rest of us peasants." James's expression grew thoughtful, and Rachel sensed there was something he wasn't telling her. "I work in business," he said vaguely, "and sometimes I prefer economy because you meet more interesting people back here. First class can be full of people who've forgotten what real life looks like." "That's a very diplomatic non-answer," Rachel observed, studying his face. "Are you some kind of mystery man? Should I be worried that I fell asleep on a stranger's shoulder?" "Nothing dangerous, I promise," James laughed, but Rachel noticed he still hadn't given her a straight answer. "Let's just say I'm in a position where I try to help people when I can, and sometimes it's easier to do that without a lot of fanfare." Before Rachel could press further, the plane began its descent, and the captain's voice filled the cabin with landing instructions. The spell of their intimate conversation was broken as passengers around them began gathering their belongings and preparing for arrival. "This is probably where we say goodbye," Rachel said, feeling unexpectedly sad about parting ways with this kind stranger, who had shown her more compassion in a few hours than she'd experienced in months. "I can't thank you enough for what you did. You saved me from complete humiliation, and you gave Sophia the best sleep she's had in weeks." "Actually," James said, reaching into his jacket pocket, "I was hoping I could give you something." He pulled out an elegant business card, cream-colored with simple black lettering. "If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, please don't hesitate to call this number." Rachel took the card and read it, her eyes widening in shock. The card was simple but expensive, with raised lettering that read, "James Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Industries." Below that was a phone number and an address in downtown Chicago. "You're James Whitmore," she whispered, staring at the card. Even she, working in a small diner and struggling to make ends meet, had heard of Whitmore Industries. They were famous for their charitable work, appearing in news stories about education initiatives, housing programs for single mothers, and job training for people in difficult circumstances. "Guilty as charged," James said with a sheepish smile. "I was trying to avoid mentioning it because I wanted to have a normal conversation with someone who wasn't trying to ask me for money or impress me with their connections." Rachel's mind raced as pieces clicked into place. This explained his expensive clothes, his ease with helping people, and his mysterious comments about being in a position to help others, but it also made his kindness toward her even more significant. He could have stayed in first class, could have ignored her struggle, could have had the flight attendant deal with the crying baby situation. Instead, he had chosen to help. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, still processing the revelation. "Because you needed help from James the person, not James the CEO," he replied. "And because I've learned that when people know who I am, they either want something from me, or they become so intimidated they can't act naturally anymore. I liked talking to you as just me." The plane touched down with a gentle thud, and passengers immediately began standing and reaching for overhead compartments, despite the flight attendant's requests to remain seated. Rachel clutched the business card, unsure whether this revelation made everything better or more complicated. "The card isn't charity," James said, as if reading her thoughts. "It's an opportunity, if you want it." As they taxied toward the gate, Rachel stared at the card in her hands, wondering if this chance encounter was about to change her life forever, or if she was about to wake up from an impossible dream. The Chicago airport buzzed with typical morning chaos as Rachel gathered her meager belongings from the overhead compartment. Her single worn duffel bag, containing everything she owned for the weekend, felt pathetically small compared to the sleek luggage other passengers were retrieving. James waited patiently beside her, holding Sophia while Rachel struggled with the bag's broken zipper. "Let me help you with that," he offered. But Rachel shook her head firmly. "I've got it," she insisted, finally wrestling the bag free. The gesture was automatic. She had learned to be fiercely independent out of necessity. Accepting help meant owing people, and owing people meant disappointment when they inevitably let you down. As they walked through the jet bridge together, Rachel felt increasingly aware of the contrast between them. James moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being important, while she clutched Sophia tightly, already dreading the upcoming confrontation with her sister Carmen. "Where are you staying for the wedding?" James asked as they entered the terminal. "A motel near the venue," Rachel replied, not mentioning that she had chosen the cheapest option she could find online, with reviews that mentioned stained carpets and questionable cleanliness. "It's not fancy, but Sophia and I don't need much." James frowned slightly. "Chicago can be unpredictable in October. Some of those budget places don't have proper heating. Have you considered—" "I can't afford anything better." Rachel cut him off, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "Look, I appreciate everything you've done, but I don't need you to solve all my problems. I've been managing on my own just fine." The words came out harsher than she intended, born from years of struggling to maintain dignity while barely surviving. James raised his hands in a peaceful gesture, clearly recognizing he had overstepped. "You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. I have a tendency to try to fix things, especially when I care about the outcome." They reached the baggage claim area, and James's phone began buzzing insistently. He glanced at it with obvious reluctance. "I need to take this," he apologized. "Work emergency that apparently can't wait." He answered with a crisp, "Whitmore here," and Rachel watched his entire demeanor shift into professional mode. While James handled his call, Rachel found herself studying him with new eyes. She had spent the flight talking to James, the kind stranger, but now she was seeing James, the CEO. The way he commanded attention, even while speaking quietly, how other business travelers in the terminal seemed to recognize him and whisper among themselves. "I understand the timeline is critical," James was saying into his phone, "but we cannot compromise on the vetting process for the housing program. These are single mothers we're talking about, not statistics on a spreadsheet." Rachel's breath caught. "Housing program for single mothers?" She strained to hear more of the conversation without appearing to eavesdrop. "No, I want to personally review every application that gets rejected," James continued firmly. "If someone is genuinely in need and we turn them away because of bureaucratic red tape, then we're failing at our mission." A terrible realization began dawning on Rachel. This morning, she had shared her most intimate struggles with a stranger on a plane, her financial problems, her housing insecurity, her status as a single mother barely making ends meet. Now she was learning that this same stranger ran programs specifically designed to help people in her exact situation. When James finished his call, he turned back to her with an apologetic smile, but Rachel was studying his face with growing suspicion. "That housing program you were just discussing," she said slowly. "How long has Whitmore Industries been running it?" "About 3 years now," James replied, seemingly pleased by her interest. "We've helped over 500 families transition into stable housing. It's one of our most successful initiatives." "And the application process?" Rachel pressed. "How do people usually find out about it?" Something in her tone must have alerted James that this wasn't casual curiosity. His expression grew cautious. "We have outreach coordinators who identify families in need. Sometimes people are referred by social services, sometimes by community organizations." "Why do you ask?" Rachel felt a cold anger building in her chest. "How convenient that you happen to be sitting in economy class right next to a single mother who fits your program's demographic perfectly. How convenient that you were so interested in hearing all about my financial struggles and housing problems." "Rachel, what are you suggesting?" James asked, but she could see the guilty knowledge in his eyes. "I'm suggesting that this whole thing, your kindness, your help with Sophia, this entire conversation, was some kind of setup. Were you already planning to offer me a spot in your housing program? Is this how Whitmore Industries finds its success stories, by targeting vulnerable women on airplanes?" "It's not like that," James said quickly, but Rachel was beyond listening to explanations. "Oh my God, I'm so stupid," she continued, her voice rising despite Sophia stirring in her arms. "I actually thought someone was being kind to me for no reason. I thought I had met someone who cared about me as a person, not as a charity case." Other passengers were beginning to stare, but Rachel was too hurt and angry to care. Everything made sense now. Why James had been so interested in her story, why he had been so careful not to reveal his identity, why he had given her his business card with such mysterious promises. "You want to know the worst part?" she said, tears of humiliation burning her eyes. "For a few hours I actually felt like I was worth something, like maybe I wasn't just some pathetic single mom who couldn't get her life together. But this whole time, you were just evaluating me like some kind of case study." "That's not true," James said, stepping closer. "Yes, I was traveling to personally oversee our Chicago programs, and yes, I sometimes take economy flights to stay connected with the people we serve. But helping you wasn't calculated, Rachel. It was human decency. And getting to know you, that was genuine." "I don't believe you," Rachel replied, though something in his voice made her want to. "People like you don't just randomly help people like me unless there's something in it for them. What were you planning to do? Follow me to my sister's wedding and document how your charity changed my life?" James ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. "I can see how this looks, but you're wrong about my motivations. Yes, I'm passionate about helping single mothers, because I've seen what they go through. My own mother raised me alone after my father left when I was 7. She worked 3 jobs just to keep us housed and fed." This revelation stopped Rachel's angry tirade cold. She studied James's face, seeing something raw and vulnerable that hadn't been there before. "Every woman we help through our programs reminds me of her," James continued quietly. "Of the nights she cried herself to sleep thinking she was failing me, of the times she went hungry so I could eat, of the way she held her head high, even when the world treated her like she was somehow less worthy because she was raising a child alone." Rachel felt her anger wavering, but the hurt was still too fresh. "Even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact that you weren't honest with me. You let me pour my heart out to you while knowing you could fix all my problems with a phone call. And if I had told you who I was from the beginning," James challenged, "would you have talked to me the same way? Would you have let me hold Sophia, or would you have assumed I had ulterior motives?" Rachel opened her mouth to argue, then realized he was right. If she had known he was a billionaire CEO with charitable programs, she would have been either suspicious of his intentions or too intimidated to be herself. But before she could respond, Sophia began crying again, the stress and raised voices disturbing her peaceful sleep. The sound cut through Rachel's emotional turmoil, reminding her that she had more immediate concerns than sorting out her complicated feelings about James Whitmore. "I have to go," she said, adjusting Sophia in her arms. "My sister is expecting me, and I've already made enough of a scene in public for one day." "Rachel, please," James called as she started walking away. "Let me explain everything properly. Let me—" But Rachel kept walking, her heart breaking with every step, wondering if she had just walked away from the answer to all her prayers, or if she had narrowly escaped becoming someone's charity project. The motel room was every bit as depressing as Rachel had expected. The carpet bore mysterious stains, the heater rattled ominously, and the thin walls meant she could hear every conversation in adjacent rooms. But none of that mattered as much as the ache in her chest from walking away from James at the airport 2 days ago. Rachel sat on the lumpy bed, trying to fix a run in her only nice dress, a simple navy blue piece she had worn to job interviews and her mother's funeral. Sophia lay on the bed beside her, finally content after a difficult night in the unfamiliar environment. Tomorrow was Carmen's wedding, and Rachel still hadn't decided if she actually had the courage to show up. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Rehearsal dinner is at 7. You're still coming to the wedding tomorrow, right?" The message was polite but distant, carrying none of the warmth Rachel remembered from their childhood. She typed and deleted several responses before settling on, "Yes, I'll be there." What she didn't tell Carmen was that she had spent the last 2 days replaying every moment of her conversation with James, wondering if she had been completely wrong about his intentions. The hurt was still there, but so was a growing regret that she might have thrown away something genuine because of her own defensive walls. A knock at the door interrupted her brooding. Rachel peered through the peephole, expecting to see the motel manager or perhaps a pizza delivery for the wrong room. Instead, she saw Carmen standing in the hallway, looking elegant in a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than Rachel's monthly rent. "Carmen?" Rachel opened the door, shocked. "What are you doing here?" Her sister stepped inside, surveying the shabby room with barely concealed dismay. "I came to talk to you before tomorrow. We need to clear the air." Rachel bristled automatically. If you're here to tell me I don't belong at your wedding, just save us both the time. Actually, Carmen said, sitting carefully on the room's single chair, I'm here to apologize and to tell you something that might change how you feel about a lot of things. This wasn't the conversation Rachel had been expecting. Carmen had always been the successful sister, the one who went to college, got the good job, married the right man. She had never apologized for anything, especially not to Rachel. 2 years ago, when we had that fight about your pregnancy, Carmen began, I said terrible things. I called you irresponsible, said you were throwing your life away, accused you of being selfish for having a baby you couldn't afford. I remember, Rachel said quietly, the old wounds still tender. What you don't know is that I was pregnant too, Carmen continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael and I had been trying for months. When I found out you were having Sophia, I was so angry because it felt like you got something I wanted so desperately, and you didn't even plan for it. Rachel stared at her sister, processing this revelation. Carmen, I had no idea. I lost the baby 2 weeks after our fight, Carmen interrupted, tears flowing freely now. And instead of calling you, instead of apologizing and asking for support, I buried myself in work and wedding planning and pretended everything was fine. I've spent 2 years being angry at you for having what I couldn't keep. The sisters sat in silence for a moment, both crying for different reasons. Rachel reached for Carmen's hand, and for the first time in years, her sister didn't pull away. I'm so sorry, Rachel whispered. I wish I had known. I wish I could have been there for you. That's not even the most important thing I came to tell you, Carmen said, wiping her eyes. Yesterday, a man called my office. He said he was trying to reach you about something urgent, but you weren't answering your phone. Rachel's heart stopped. James? James Whitmore, yes. He explained that you two had met on a flight and that there had been some kind of misunderstanding. He asked if I knew how to reach you, and when I told him I was your sister, he asked if we could meet. You met with him? Rachel asked, alarmed. I did. And Rachel, you need to know what he told me. Carmen leaned forward earnestly. He said he's been looking for you for 2 days, not because of any housing program or charity initiative, but because he's in love with you. The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. That's impossible. We knew each other for a few hours. That's what I told him, Carmen replied. But then he spent 20 minutes telling me about every detail of your conversation, about how Sophia fell asleep in his arms, about how brave and strong you are, about how you made him remember why he started his charitable work in the first place. He wasn't talking like a CEO discussing a program participant. He was talking like a man who had found something precious and lost it. Rachel's mind raced. But the housing program, he explained that too. He was traveling to Chicago for business, yes, and he does sometimes fly economy to stay connected with the people his programs serve. But helping you wasn't part of some elaborate recruitment scheme. He said he gave you his card because he wanted to see you again, not because he wanted to evaluate you for charity. Then why didn't he just tell me that? Carmen smiled sadly. Because he was afraid you'd think he was trying to buy your affection with money and programs. He said he's dealt with too many people who only saw him as a wallet, and he wanted you to know him as just James first. Rachel felt her carefully constructed anger crumbling. Even if that's all true, we come from completely different worlds. He's a billionaire CEO, and I'm a single mum who can barely afford this horrible motel room. That's the other thing, Carmen said, pulling out her phone. He asked me to show you this. She opened a news article from 3 years ago with the headline, Whitmore CEO establishes single mother housing initiative in memory of late mother. Below was a photo of James at a ribbon-cutting ceremony standing next to a modest apartment building. Read the quote, Carmen instructed. Rachel read aloud. My mother, Maria Santos Whitmore, raised me alone after my father abandoned us when I was 7. She worked 3 jobs to keep us housed and fed, often going hungry herself so I could eat. This program exists because no child should wonder if they'll have a home tomorrow, and no mother should have to choose between feeding her child and paying rent. Santos was his mother's maiden name, Carmen explained. She was a single mother from East LA who cleaned offices at night and worked in a factory during the day. James grew up in poverty, Rachel. He understands your world because he lived it. Rachel sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by this new information. Everything she thought she knew about James was shifting, revealing a picture of someone who truly understood struggle and chose to help others because of it, not despite it. There's more, Carmen said gently. He's here, in Chicago. He's been staying at the hotel where my reception is tomorrow night, not because he's trying to intrude, but because he's hoping you'll give him a chance to explain everything properly. He's at your wedding venue. I invited him, Carmen admitted. After hearing his story, after seeing how desperate he was to find you and make things right, I thought maybe this was fate. Maybe you two were supposed to meet, and maybe I was supposed to help fix what got broken. Rachel looked down at Sophia, who was watching her with bright, curious eyes. Her daughter deserved a father figure who would love and protect her, and Rachel deserved someone who saw her as more than just a struggling single mother. "What if I'm not brave enough?" Rachel whispered. "What if I'm too scared of getting hurt?" "Then you'll spend the rest of your life wondering, what if?" Carmen replied. "And Rachel, you're the bravest person I know. You've survived everything life has thrown at you, and you've raised a beautiful daughter while doing it. If you can do all that, you can certainly take a chance on love." The next evening, Rachel stood outside the elegant hotel ballroom where Carmen's reception was in full swing. She had borrowed a dress from her sister, a beautiful emerald green gown that made her feel like someone who belonged in such a fancy place. Sophia was upstairs with the hotel babysitter, sleeping peacefully for once. Through the glass doors, Rachel could see the celebration inside. Carmen looked radiant in her wedding dress, dancing with her new husband while guests mingled around elegant tables decorated with white roses and gold accents. And there, at a table near the back, sat James in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, watching the door as if he had been waiting for her all evening. Their eyes met through the glass, and Rachel saw something in his expression that took her breath away. It wasn't pity or charity or even simple attraction. It was love. Real, honest, overwhelming love that made her feel seen and valued for exactly who she was. James rose from his chair and walked toward the door, never breaking eye contact. When he reached her, he stopped just close enough that she could see the hope and fear warring in his blue eyes. "I was afraid you wouldn't come," he said softly. "I was afraid too," Rachel admitted. "But someone recently told me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you're terrified." "I should have been honest with you from the beginning," James said. "Not about who I am professionally, but about how I felt. The moment Sophia fell asleep in my arms and you trusted me enough to rest your head on my shoulder, I knew my life had changed forever." "James," Rachel began, but he held up a gentle hand. "Let me finish, please. I don't want to help you because you're a charity case. I want to build a life with you because you're the strongest, most genuine person I've ever met. I want to be Sophia's father not because she needs one, but because I already love her as if she were my own. And I want to wake up every morning knowing that I get to spend another day with the woman who reminded me what really matters in life." Rachel felt tears streaming down her cheeks, but for the first time in months they were tears of joy instead of despair. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling for you the moment you took Sophia in your arms and made her feel safe. But I was so scared of being hurt again, of being disappointed again, that I almost threw it all away." James stepped closer, gently cupping her face in his hands. "You never have to be scared of that with me. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you and Sophia are the most important things in my world." As he leaned down to kiss her, Rachel realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the simplest acts of kindness. A crying baby, a stranger's helping hand, and the courage to trust again had led her to something she had never dared to dream of, a love that would change not just her circumstances, but her entire world. When they finally broke apart, James smiled and said, "So would you like to dance? I believe this is where our real story begins." Rachel took his hand, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not as a charity case and her benefactor, but as two people who had found in each other the missing pieces of their hearts. And as they walked into the ballroom together, Sophia slept peacefully upstairs, dreaming perhaps of the loving family that awaited her when she woke.